Mhm.
Welcome as everyone trickles in. Jessica and Tammy, what are your favorite flavors of ice cream?
Mm. Oh, chocolate, of course.
Chocolate.
I like peanut butter cup.
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm a chocolate chip gal, but it
Uh,
depends on the day. We have a lot of frozen custard places too where I live, and so anything custard related I'm interested in too.
I don't think I've ever had frozen custard. It sounds delicious.
It's really good.
Nice.
Absolutely. Well, if you're ever in the St. Louis area, let me know.
Oh, yeah. Well, we don't have that. I'm in Maine, so ours is straightforward frozen yogurt and ice cream, but
Well, I will let you know when I come up to Maine because I hear it's absolutely beautiful up there.
it is. Well, especially this time of year. Winter, not as much. I mean, it's beautiful. It's just really cold.
Oh, I'm sure. Do you guys get a lot of snow?
Yes, yes.
Oof.
Depends on northern Maine gets way more snow. I'm in southern Maine, but yeah, a lot of snow.
I bet we'll give everybody maybe one more minute to trickle in and then we can jump into it. All right, so next question when it comes to Maine. Lobster, is it really as big as of a thing as we think it is?
It sure is. Yeah, it is. People come obviously from all over for lobster, and yeah, it's quite delicious. I'm sort of a lobster snob. If I go outside of Maine, I feel like if it's frozen or if it's been, refrigerated for a long period of time, I can tell like our lobster is super, super fresh. So I am very
Oh,
spoiled up here.
oh, okay. Well, then I'll definitely be making my way up there
Yeah,
soon. That sounds fabulous.
it's delicious.
All right. Well, I'm sure people love hearing me grill you guys about favorite foods and everything, but I don't know the perfect transition into insurance gaps and RIAs, but we can just make it work ourselves. So, thank you guys all for joining us today. I'm super excited to have Tammy and Jessica on with us. We'll tell you a little bit more about them as we go along, but let's talk a little bit about cyber insurance and compliance, what you guys need to know to stay protected, and how this should work in your everyday day to day. So let's jump into it. Sam, if you don't mind flipping the slide for me, thank you guys very much. Oh, one too far. My name is Claudia. I am the inside sales account manager for Visory. I talk all things RIA all day long, and I've brought along the beautiful Tammy as well if you want to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Claudia. I'm Tammy Jutras, the Director of Cybersecurity Services here at Visory. I've been here for over 10 years and just do everything cybersecurity. I'm in charge of our SOC and work with clients all day on their compliance and all questions they have about cybersecurity.
Thanks so much. And we have the fabulous Jessica as well on as our guest speaker today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to have this opportunity. I'm Jessica Thayer. I have been with Starkweather and Shepley for over 6 years. I've been in the industry for much longer than that, over 20 years, specializing in cyber and professional lines of insurance from the beginning. And then about 5 or 6 years into my career, I really focused on financial institutions, specifically registered investment advisor and fund complexes. And our practice, our financial institutions practice, is part of Starkweather and Shepley, which is a large insurance brokerage firm based out of Providence, Rhode Island. Our division, we have about over 2,000 clients across the country that we help with their insurance needs, whether that be on the property and casualty side, but also on the professional liability, also known as errors and omissions, and directors and officers liability, as well as cyber liability insurance. So we help all of our clients assess their needs on the insurance side and their risks, and help them build programs around that. So again, thanks for having me today.
I'm really excited to dive into it. I feel like you're a wealth of knowledge, so let's rock and roll. Guys, today what we'll be focusing on in terms of an agenda, first and foremost is building that cyber resilient foundation. So the best way to build a building is have a strong foundation, and that applies to your businesses as well. So we'll talk about what the small steps are to being cyber resilient. Then we'll transition into navigating the liability insurance arena. I know a lot of folks have a lot of anxiety when it comes to this. I know I talk to a lot of prospects every day who ask me questions about their cyber insurance and the policies or requirements that come with that. And then finally, we'll end with connecting the dots. So everything from policy, real world responses, risk, etc. We're going to pull together and give you guys a little bit of information about where we can tie this all in.
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and just give you a quick high-level overview of, some of the pieces that are involved in your cybersecurity strategy. Visory really recommends taking a layered defense, or sometimes you'll hear this called defense in depth. And really what that involves is deploying multiple overlapping security measures across your environment. And that's designed to reduce the likelihood of a successful cyber attack, right? The idea there is that if one layer fails, there will still be others that will provide protection. In this day and age, it's very common for attackers to, really look for those weak points in to gain entry into an environment. So, it's almost like playing whack-a-mole, right? As soon as you put something in, for a protective layer, they figure out how to get around it. So it's really, really important to have those multiple layers of reporting and monitoring and things that can take action. And then, your documentation and policy development, right? So having a written information security policy, that's going to define the bones and the structure of your security. And then you're going to implement your frameworks sort of according to that, right? And that's going to be where your technology stack comes in. So things like your endpoint protection, that's really evolved over the years, right? Your standard antivirus that's been around for a long time, that has really expanded into now what we call EDR, MDR, which is endpoint detection and response, or managed detection and response. The idea there is that, these products are designed to be able to take action quickly based on some of the things that they see going on an endpoint. And that becomes really important, especially in a time-based attack, because they can actually, stop some things from progressing. They can quarantine and remove endpoints from the network. So in the case of maybe a ransomware attack, you have some chance of possibly mitigating that or keeping it to a much smaller footprint. And then there's things that you want to do to be logging what's happening in your environment, right? So that becomes really important if you have to move into a breach scenario and work with a forensic team. You want to be able to have those logs to determine, what happened. Was data exfiltrated? Maybe not, right? That might be the best case scenario where you can prove that nothing was taken. And so it's really important to have those logs. Otherwise, you just don't have that breadcrumb trail. And so things also like your cloud and your email security, that's a big vector. Attackers still go after email accounts, trying to compromise them with phishing and social engineering emails, because quite simply, they still work, right? People still fall for them. They still click on links and download things and put in their passwords. So they're using these time-honored attacks because they're still working. So that's just an area that you want to make sure that you have some good, sort of security around your incoming mail. And then there's things like ongoing awareness training, right? Keeping that security training fresh all the time, right? Maybe on a monthly or quarterly basis versus just one time a year. This helps your employees to, really understand what the techniques are, what the tactics are. And, Visory does, like some phishing attempts, right? So we will put some safe phishing emails out for folks, and this gives them the opportunity to see what a real attack would look like, had they fallen for that. And then just ongoing oversight, right? With your technology partner, you want to be involved in that relationship. You want to know what's going on, know what you have for your protections in place. And just to kind of sum all of that up, I really, Visory follows the NIST, the CSF, the cyber framework. And that really comes down to the identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover, right? So you want to know what your attack surface is, knowing your assets, your hardware, knowing what you have for access controls, right? Making sure that people have just the right amount of permissions to do their job, but not overly heavy on administrative privileges. And the detect is you want to have some continuous monitoring and that detection of anomalies in your environment, right? So that if something happens, you're going to know about it without it going into, months and months. And then you want to have your incident response plan, right, in your communication. You want to have that all ahead of time and written and in your back pocket. Because when you find yourself in the middle of an incident, that's pretty stressful. And so if you already have a document that you can refer to, it's going to give you a lot of peace and calmness knowing that you have all the steps laid out and you just have to follow them. And then lastly, just the recovery planning and lessons learned, right? It's always a good idea to, if you do have an incident, use that to improve going forward and make sure that, that one is not one that's going to get you again.
Fabulous, guys. We're going to actually change it up today and send out a poll question. So if you all could take a look at your screen that's being sent out, please go ahead and answer so we can do a little temperature check mid webinar here. I'll play some hold music while we wait. That's probably my last webinar I'll be invited to after the hold music, but that's all right. All right. So it looks like we've got, in terms of who's carrying currently cybersecurity insurance, about half of you actively are, and then a quarter of you are in the process of evaluating, and a quarter are not quite sure. That's all right. I'm really glad that you found this webinar today as we dive into it. And then the biggest concerns is pretty equally spaced, but ransomware or extortion is up at the top in terms of the biggest concern when it comes to cybersecurity risks. I completely understand, and I'm sure Jessica and Tammy have seen things that would all keep us up at night in terms of ransomware and extortion with the amount of money that a typical RIA is managing. Followed along with business interruption and client data breaches, both super important and definitely scary things because your reputation is on the line at the end of the day, especially as what could be considered a small business. Many folks, rely on word of mouth for new clients coming in, and that can definitely disrupt everything. So super glad that everyone is here, and I think these are all very reasonable fears, unfortunately.
And I like the fact that there was no one that said no to cyber insurance there. So that's always good.
Absolutely.
We're getting there.
So let's talk, I'll take this one, guys, a little bit about compliance essentials and regulatory expectations and where they overlap. So I talk about this pretty passionately in terms of making sure you have plans in place, not just for yourself, but of course for the regulatory expectations everyone is under. The perfect way to say this is you want to have the tornado drill prior to the actual tornado. So things like having your written cybersecurity policy in place is actually going to be a requirement for you guys, not just from a regulatory perspective, but from an insurance perspective as well. Your insurance brokers are wanting to see that you have a plan in place if the tornado is coming down the block, rather than, oh no, what do we do? Does anyone have a storm shelter? metaphor, but continuing. We also want to make sure you have an incident response plan. So I talk about this in depth with RIAs I work with day in and day out. What does happen if you do discover a breach? What does happen if an employee accidentally clicks on a link that looks fishy in an email and suddenly they get the blue screen of death? Do you have a plan in place, not just for yourself, but to ensure that what may happen because of those potential mistakes is covered by your policy as well? Some insurance agencies have clauses in their policies requiring things like that in order for you guys to be covered effectively in the event of losses, right? I know we're all concerned about that ransomware option. We want to make sure things like this are already in place, and these overlap beautifully with expectations that insurance companies are seeing. I'm sure Jessica could agree to that. Employee training as well is a huge one. We always recommend it, not just because it is a requirement. Yes, it is a requirement, but also because the best cybersecurity hygiene is washing your hands every day or testing your weakest links every day. Your employees unfortunately have just as much access into your environment as maybe an admin does. So we want to make sure that they're being safe in their email management and their online tracking and everything in between while they're working with clients as well. And then, of course, broker collaboration. So having Jessica on today is so exciting for us because we really get to see that other side of the coin. But making sure that you're understanding and aware of what your policy does cover and the items that you need to have in place in order for it to be covered appropriately. I'll pass it back to Tammy here on this side before the breach.
Thank you so much, Claudia. Yeah, I love this graphic here because, it's really about sort of securing your business and putting all of those touch points in, to keep the bad guys out, right? This is really the cyber shield that's gonna, that's gonna thwart everything here. So if you kind of look at this from a, like a defense in depth, right? We've got that external, that firewall is the first thing that is facing the public, right? And so you want to make sure that you have a business class firewall or a software firewall or VPN, whatever is pertinent to your network infrastructure, and make sure that things like remote desktop and remote access are not publicly available to the external world. And then you sort of move your way inside. There's that endpoint detection, right? So if something does happen to get through that first layer, the endpoint has that endpoint detection and managed detection on it so that it can recognize something and maybe take an action on it and stop things there. As we move around a little bit, those proper configurations and patching become really, really important. These are ongoing things. You might hear terms like, vulnerability management, of course, patching, third-party patching, all of the software that you use on a day-to-day basis, whether it's through your Windows or your Mac or, your applications, all of those have, what we call vulnerabilities in them, right? They can have things that can be exploited, and once those items are found, that makes it through the underworld community pretty quickly, right? How those things can be exploited. And so the vendors patch their products and they have updates. So it's really important that you keep that software up to date because they're fixing these holes and things that the bad actors are using to get through into your systems, right? And then, of course, that cybersecurity awareness training, it seems like a really simple thing, but it's very, very important because when you think about some of these other layers, a lot of them are programmed through software or hardware, meaning that, your firewall is going to be configured to do, A, B, and C, and it's going to do that every single time, right? If somebody tries to break through and you have, B configuration in place, it's going to deny it. But a human can actually make a decision. They can open the door, right? They can take an action. And so oftentimes, a lot of, time, effort, and money is spent on these external software defenses. And so it makes it really difficult for the hackers to get past them. So they've learned to go around them instead, and try to get the human to open the door, right? So through trickery and social engineering and all kinds of things. So that really is a last line of defense, if you will. And the threat landscape has really intensified, right? Cyber attacks are no longer just a risk that you might face. They're nearly certain. You've probably heard the term, it's not if, but when, right? And same thing with compliance, right? It's no longer optional or just a suggestion. The SEC and FINRA have significantly raised the bar lately, and require many more controls and oversight by firms. So this is something that's not going away, and it's only, really going to help everyone in the long run. So like we talked about, that end-to-end defense on all the things is important. And these are things that you're going to be required to attest to. I'm sure Jessica will bring that up on her slide. But when you fill out your cyber liability application, there's going to be questions on there asking you, do you have a firewall? Do you have, they'll call it EDR, which is that endpoint detection. They might even ask you what vendor is it? Is it SentinelOne? Is it, CrowdStrike? Is it something else? They're going to ask you about training, and all of that. So you're going to need to attest that you have these controls in place. And I'll just leave you with, attacks will happen. Essentially, you want to make your firm as difficult a target as possible, in the hopes that they'll move on to somebody else.
Really excited, Jessica, to hear a little bit from your side. Tammy and I spoke to the cybersecurity Visory end of things, but if you would share a little bit about when prevention isn't enough.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I mean, Tammy talked in detail about what you can do on the preventative side, but what happens if maybe there's a downfall in something? Then the insurance comes in. So the insurance acts as a backstop. So you have your pre-breach, proactive cybersecurity, and then you have your cybersecurity response plan. And as part of that response plan, you do want to bake in your cyber insurance. And a lot of people, believe it or not, I've had clients when they have an incident call me directly, and it could be, 8 o'clock at night on a Friday, and I am not the person to call. I put it in place, it will work, but call typically these insurance companies have a hotline. And baking that sort of hotline or breach response, either number or email to get the right experts involved right from the beginning is critical. And as part of that, what happens in that sort of post breach scenario is they will get the right resources involved, whether that be data forensics to sort of plug up the hole that was present, or get negotiators involved if it's a cyber extortion incident. But the resources at these insurers are very, very valuable at that point, and that's when obviously they get everything ready and able to put in force for you at that point in time. And honestly, looking at and making sure you're comfortable with your program from the beginning is critical. There are insurers, especially those E&O insurers that were trying to satisfy some of the custodian requirements that provided sort of watered down cyber insurance. Maybe it's a $250,000 sublimit for cyber that provides, very bare bones coverage, but it checks the box for some of these custodian requirements. And a lot of advisory firms went that way, which is fine. But you have to understand that you may not have the coverage you thought you really had. And so it's really important to sort of weigh maybe that, endorsement to your errors and omissions policy to a standalone, very robust program with the resources like I just talked about that's available. And look even a step further or work with your agent or broker to not only look at, price and deductible levels, which is obviously a very important part of everything, but also a lot of the coverages that are available. So each form is very different. Each insurance company addresses the coverage very differently, whether it be through endorsements or insuring agreements. and they may sublimit a very important coverage. So understanding what coverages are sublimated and the limits available to you through the various insuring agreements is critical. And then in the next slide, we talk about this a bit more. And that it's really just the application process. That's the start of getting your cyber insurance right. I know Tammy talked about this in a few slides ago, but it's really making sure that you're doing the right things from the preventative side. That is going to be very clear in the application process. These insurers, they've seen the claims, they know where the claims are coming from, they change, very often. But making sure that you have the most up-to-date endpoint detection, that training is being provided to all the employees. The phishing emails, those are real. That's where we see the majority of the claims is an employee clicking on a very simple email and allowing access to these bad actors. And then the bad actors, they shut down the systems and require a ransom. That is the most typical cyber insurance claim that we see. And so these insurers are really underwriting to that. One, through the application process, and then two, they do scans of your systems during the underwriting process, as well as some insurers even do it midterm. So that all goes into the entire sort of analysis that the insurers provide in order to get your quote to you. And then like I said, many insurers, they're not all created equal. So you really have to understand what one insurer is providing over the other. And really, it should be your agent or broker that's able to outline the differences between those insurers to you. Starkweather and Shepley has partnered actually with a firm called CyberCube. A lot of our clients were asking us, well, this is all well and good. I feel really comfortable with the type of insurance that I have and the insurance company that I have, but how do I know that I have the right limit level? How do I know what I could be sued for from a data breach, or what the extortion amount could be? So we partnered with CyberCube to be able to provide our clients with these analytics. And what this does is this actually takes 50,000 loss scenarios and takes very specific industry information, as well as the client specific policies and procedures and protocols that they have in place, and overlays it over these loss scenarios. And then we're able to provide various data as to, one, how insurers may perceive you in relation to other firms in your industry. And obviously that impacts the pricing and deductible levels. And then two, what you can expect in terms of severity of these losses. So if we actually skip ahead to the next slide here, you can see this is an example of some of this analysis. And this is one firm's data that shows how they benchmark in terms of their peers. So in terms of ransomware, and with the policies and procedures and protocols that they have in place currently, they're 33 percentile of all peers within their group, meaning they could probably do better in that area. And so maybe the insurance companies want to sublimit that coverage or provide a higher deductible for that ransomware coverage. This all plays into the analysis. And again, the insurers don't see this information. This is more for your firm and the firm's leadership to be able to say, hey, we may be able to even lower our, one, risk exposure, and two, premiums on the cyber front even lower if we address the risks within these areas. And then in the second slide here, in terms of data, this is one firm's, it's called aggregate financial exposure chart. So this takes the actual loss scenarios and basically provides what your potential losses could be in the percentile for such. And so you can back into what you should be purchasing for insurance through a slide like this. So this is saying in this scenario, if you purchase $10 million of insurance, you're theoretically insuring for 99% of all losses. Now, does everyone insure for 99%? No, some people settle for 97%, 95%. and they'll base their risk off of that and their insurance buying decisions based off of this. But it's easier than saying, we think you could, having a lot of the sort of the unknowns behind what you should be purchasing for cyber, and providing more concrete data behind it through this platform that we're able to use. So clients have found this extremely helpful, and it helps them through the insurance buying process. And again, the insurance companies, I'm sure they have data on their end. They're not seeing this information. It's really just for our clients, but it is helpful in the overall process.
All right, guys, we're going to stop again for our next poll question after listening to us chat a little bit. It'll pop up on your screen here in a moment. Jessica, I'm so glad to have you on this webinar. I feel like I'm learning things every time I talk to you about what you guys look for, and some of the little bit of horror stories that you've seen as well.
Yeah, it changes every day too. Like I said, the cyber extortion really is what we see most often. I mean, it's something simple too. Like I had a client call and they said, listen, somebody went back to their computer and their mouse is moving into different client accounts. What should we do? Call the data breach hotline. And so it's something as simple as that. Nobody knows how they get into the system until data forensics gets in there. It's typically an open port of some sort, or honestly, most frequently, it's these employees clicking on something. These hackers are quite savvy in terms of making it look like a real email that you should click on, or a client request of some sort. I mean, this is their job, is to trick your employees into allowing them into your system. And that's why when Tammy was talking about employee training, insurers they really do hone in on that, because your employees really are your first line of defense against some of these bad actors. So
I feel like you're warming my heart. I feel like I say that all the time to my kids too. Poll did come out. It looks like are lacking a little bit of confidence when it comes to understanding if your insurance policy covers the full scope of those business risks. 50% saying somewhat confident, 25% saying not confident, some not sure what it covers, but nobody on our webinar today is very confident in their policy or in their knowledge on their policy. So definitely something to pull up after our call today. But I find that really interesting.
yeah, and these insurance policies, they can be very confusing. And like I said, each insurance company addresses risks different ways within the policy. So it's really important I have a lot of clients that get on the phone with the cyber insurer and talk through various scenarios. And some of these insurers will even they'll go through various, claim scenarios or incident scenarios, and talk through how the coverage does or doesn't apply. I mean, again, it all comes down to when you're actually in an incident, what the scenario is and what the facts are before it can actually be covered or not. But they can sort of take you through hypotheticals over a call. And like I said, a lot of them have great portals and resources that are available. So something to tap into for sure.
Awesome. So, a question posed to both of you, right? Who does the scanning?
I was gonna say, I can start out and then let Jessica fill in. I mean, I'm gonna be speaking to it more from a technical IT related side of things. And we do work with a lot of companies and clients, and we help them with their cyber liability insurance. We help them, with some of these scans. So I see both sides of it really, although I'm not an expert like Jessica on the insurance piece of it. But really, the insurance companies are providing these cybersecurity tools, which are scans. They could be, like Jessica said, sometimes they even offer some specific tools that you can install on your endpoint. And they're value adds, right, to you as part of your policy. Typically they're limited in scope to some external domain scans, right? They're scanning your web URL, right? Your domain name. And that gives them a lot of information, but it doesn't give them all the information about your environment. Sometimes they're doing basic endpoint protection. They might do some risk assessments for you or with you, but those are usually tied to underwriting. And when I say that, it's for the insurance company's benefit, right? They are doing this to protect and reduce their liability, right? And any incident response guidance, post breach. I usually tell folks, if they're having an incident and they come to Visory and we work on things, as soon as we have the account secured, I always tell them, reach out to your insurance provider, reach out to your legal team, right? Because there are certain things that need to happen next to determine, where you go with this incident. So I would just kind of sum it up as being really, it's a strategic partnership versus maybe like a transactional coverage, right? So insurance companies are offering these tools to reduce their own exposure, whereas Visory or your IT provider acts more as that fiduciary technology partner to you, and really embedding the security and the additional layers of software into your operations and not just for the underwriting pieces of it. I know Visory has dedicated cybersecurity engineers. We deal with this stuff all the time. And I was smiling when Jessica was talking about, some of these forensic teams, because we do see a lot of the patterns over and over again. It's very cyclical, right? We might see a certain attack, and the indicators of compromise are like almost exactly the same. So for us, we know very quickly possibly, what's happening, what they might have access to, what they might have left behind, right? Because we do this all the time. So it's the same with the tools and the providers that are working with the insurance companies. They are a great resource if you need them. And then, I would just say that, someone like Visory is really a customizable partner that can grow with you, right? And help you address your risk profile, and, do roadmaps, business continuity planning, all those kinds of things. So I don't know if Jessica has anything to add
Agreed.
from that.
Yeah, and honestly, the insurance companies do not want you to rely on their scanning. They want you to have an expert like Tammy at Visory to do things on the front end. They're underwriting to that. Having the experts involved from the beginning is extremely important to these insurers. They're, like Tammy said, they're really doing the scanning for their own benefit, and that's to, once they have you on board, well, one, they want to make sure that you're a good risk for their portfolio, and so they'll scan as part of the underwriting process. And you may not, depending on what the scan comes back with, you may not even be able to get coverage insurance coverage, if you don't have, if there's open ports and issues with the scans. So, having that upfront expertise is crucial. Yeah, the insurers, as part of the underwriting process, they'll scan, and then there are some insurers, Tokyo Marine, HCC, and Chubb are two that come to mind. I think Beasley might also do it, where they'll scan periodically through the policy year. And if they see any issues, patches that are required or open ports, you'll get an email and they'll ask you to rectify those issues as soon as possible. So some of them are doing it, during the policy period, but I would say the majority of the insurers are doing as part of the underwriting process. And so it's important to have the experts involved prior to that, and not to use the insurance as your first line of defense on the scanning front. A lot of clients, find it helpful to have the insurers scan. Some of it find it, kind of annoying because they're already addressing it with a third party. So it really depends on the firm as to, as to how you want to use that information. But you do get a report for those insurance companies that do scan, either as part of the underwriting process or during the policy period. You will get those results, and so you can bring that back to whomever you're using as a third party, or if you're doing everything internally, you'll be able to have those results and make sure that you're addressing any concerns that the insurance company had. So yeah, so it is an important tool. Like I said, each insurance company might do it a little bit differently. It's their proprietary process, but it typically is available.
Dun dun dun. So
Yeah.
a breach happens. What if it happens? What do you do now, Jessica? I'm sure you're familiar with this side of things.
Well, hopefully you have a breach response plan. If you don't, get one in place. And the breach response plan should have the cyber insurance piece in there, how the insurance, and again, you might move carriers at your annual insurance renewal. You may keep the same insurer, but you'll want to address your response plan to reflect how you notify the insurer. Because like I said, these insurers have the breach response team that comes into play and basically is almost acts like a project manager for the incident. So baking that into that plan is really crucial. And then obviously you'll be involved as the insurance company, and their team addresses the items. They may require, information and access to the systems and all that. So it's really just making sure that you initiate the process properly, and then from there all the puzzle pieces should fall into place. But you'd be surprised, a lot of firms just keep their response plan and their insurance completely separate, and they really should be dovetailed together.
I feel like every time I do one of these webinars, I learn so much from our guests and from Tammy. So thank you guys both. Really, what we're seeing is, I love this graphic, the perfect formula for as much safety as you can have in your business. So part A, prevention, right? That's where Visory, that's where your cybersecurity experts can come into play. Your IT professionals, the ones who see this day in and day out, you have to have solid prevention. But on top of that, you have to have a solid policy, because as much as prevention we want to claim is 100% of the time 100% perfect, like we've said, there are always gaps in human factors that come into play in the cybersecurity world, right? So if we add our partnership of policy plus prevention, we will get what? Resiliency. I often cite cyber insurance in my calls as front runners in the charge for cyber safety, for cybersecurity. So I truly see this as a symbiotic relationship between the company that can provide the what if case scenario, as well as the ones that going to fight to prevent the what if from happening. So if you can bookend both a solid cybersecurity company with a solid insurance company, I truly believe your safety is beyond what it could be measured as. I appreciate the time we've spent today. Tammy, if you want to elaborate on that for me.
Yeah, yeah, sure. I'll just kind of wrap it up here. I mean, I've said a lot of this stuff already, but just to kind of put a nail in it here, Visory really positions ourselves not just as your service provider, but really as your fiduciary technology partner, right? We want to be a partner with you in your business. And we know what the insurance applications are looking for, and we can assist you in deploying and configuring those proper protection layers, which will reduce your exposure to threats. We use AI-driven tools, and we have a SOC, a Security Operations Center, that can detect and respond to threats in real time. Our services are built around industry standard frameworks like the NIST CSF that I mentioned earlier. And these are all industry standards that take into account the sort of full life cycle of how to protect your environment. And they also meet the SEC and the FINRA compliance mandates. So to just sum all of this up, really, our team acts as an extension of your internal staff, right? We stand shoulder to shoulder to you, should an incident occur, and it's very common for us to work alongside insurance companies and forensic teams when they need to investigate further.
All right, guys, thank you so much for your time. We're going to do one last poll question. In terms of our conversation today, what would be most helpful in improving your cybersecurity insurance readiness? Oh, I got a little blurry there for a second. As we wait for these answers to pour in, guys, Jessica, Tammy, any final thoughts or questions or things that you've learned today as well?
Got nothing. I've been
Nothing.
spewing it out the whole time.
I love it. I always feel like I learn so much. All right, our results. We've got a pretty even split. Risk assessment or audit, help understanding policy options and coverage gaps, and vendor coordination. So tech and insurance are all top of mind. I appreciate everyone who answered the poll. We do have contact information up for Starkweather and Shepley. We've really appreciated Jessica's time here today. I know in the prep and in today, I've gotten a lot of insight into just exactly what you guys focus on, which I know helps our mutual clients as well. So thank you again for your time. Take a screenshot, take a picture, everybody. This is your go-to gal.
Yeah, and happy to answer any questions or, if people have program specific questions, we get those a lot. And we're always happy to help. So we have a great team, and anytime, whether it be, how your E&O endorsement applies to the cyber, and or just, any questions about cyber or E&O, or even the fidelity bond and how the three really, combine to provide the coverage that you need. We're happy to answer any and all questions. So thank you.
Thank you. For information on booking a time with me and talking all things managed services and cybersecurity with Visory, here is my information. I also have a scan to book link it below. Take a picture, take a screenshot. I would love to have ongoing conversations with you guys. And we do have one last final kind of freebie that we've been sharing with all of the RIA community lately. We have a security self-audit checklist. So a very quick self-managed audit. You can go through your own environment and see if you find any gaps as well. Jessica, Tammy, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you both so much for joining me today. If you guys need anything, you know where to get us, but we will see you in our next webinar.
Thank you,
Thanks, everyone.
Claudia. Thank you, Tammy.
Thanks, guys.